Are there any more questions? Yes.
Do you think they will be able to follow some of those children in future tapings, filming?
That's a good question. That's it.
Well, it was something we would love to. We would love to.
Great, really. I mean, it's basically all about the risks involved to them and the people filming them, really. But I mean, I think it would be great because they potentially, well, all of those young contributors really were terrific. I mean, they were very emotive and they were very natural. They were a joy to watch when the rushes came in, when you know, people you didn't know, you'd never met before, we'd not been out there filming, which is a slightly different thing. Normally you kind of be building up a relationship, you don't know what to expect, and you have some sort of assumptions about what these young people would be like. You know, these were just, they were beautiful people, you know, and it would be nice to follow that in a way.
Would that be something, do you think, that would be of interest to follow the children?
At the moment, of course, the children are totally innocent. I mean, they haven't a clue how what they're saying is going to go into any kind of context. Maybe the 16-year-old is the ex-boy's monk. I mean, he's a bit older than the two girls. But, you know, you run a risk by sort of continuing, don't you? For them, I mean.
Well, that's right, that's the guy, that's the
So, I
thing
mean, I
to
think you
balance.
have to be very careful. It is very interesting,
Yeah.
might be said, but I'm
Yeah.
not sure it's, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, looking back at it tonight, I must say, I mean, I think maybe a bit of distance, I had the same feeling, you know, I'd love to go and see what happened. But the problem is with the country whether that's actually doable, whether that's wise for them and the camera. But it's a good idea.
But also in a way, I think, you know, I'm trying to think of the really, with the contributors, we didn't do any more than 3 visits, did we really? I think it was sort of, you know, an initial visit and then you could see and assess that material amongst many different characters and see which ones had the stories that you might wish to follow, and also whether you could follow those stories would determine the next stage, you know. But I don't think we ever filmed anyone more than 3 times.
Did either of you work much on Burma before this?
Definitely.
Yeah, I've worked on Burma since probably the early 90s. I was based in Southeast Asia for the Australian Broadcasting Corporation. As you can probably tell, I'm Australian. Tasmania. So that's where I first got sort of engaged in covering it. It just always fascinated me because it's such a closed and little understood and yet sort of deeply fascinating place in many ways. We don't, you know, to me it was like, here's this, you know, the people have had an election, they voted out the military ignored them, and all these things have happened as a result of that. And so it was clearly a story of, in a way, it's very hard in the world to sort of find, you know, good and bad. I mean, it's always a bit grey, you know, and yet these guys seem to me that this is a clear case where people have spoken, they're being ignored, these things are happening, the country's being held back. So, yeah, I think I've just always wanted to, I think as a journalist, I've always also wanted, the regime tries to stop us getting in to tell people's stories. And I've felt that if I'm going to do this job at all, then I have the responsibility to at least try to not let that win.
If I could ask another question, it's probably impossible to answer, but I'll ask it anyway. Clearly, from a Western point of view, we see the horror of this regime. We hope for some sort of relief in it sort of coming into some sort of, quotes, westernized sort of solution, hopefully in the democratic, etc. But isn't it also the biggest black shadow of it is actually it's going to finish up with another sort of unacceptable situation. The Chinese playing the long game will actually just effectively take over when this regime crumbles as it was sometime.
I couldn't answer that question, but I think what's interesting is looking at the material that we found. You don't really see any sometime soon kind of development that the regime is going to fall, really. I mean, that's the most depressing aspect of it, really. If anything, the life in those rushes of the people who live there are getting progressively worse, and the sort of corrupt dictatorship that exists there is you know, it probably fulfills a function for other sort of surrounding powers to kind of sort of prop up a dictatorship like that, because it has the functionality in a rather dark kind of way, you know. But I mean,
It's a very, very interesting strategic question, actually. I mean, China, the Burmese regime has only survived because of China, because of its support. At the same time, the Burmans are extremely proud and nationalistic. And I know from the material I'm doing on this current project, we've got interviews with defectors who are quite senior who say, you know, listen, the Burmese don't like the Chinese any more than they like anybody else. You know, they're just as suspicious. It's just that it's convenient at the moment. But I think what's going to emerge in the next few years will be that Burma, like places like Zimbabwe or Sudan, are going to be a battleground for the new battle in a way of influence between basically America and China, because it's about resources. And Burma is actually full of resources that we don't realise yet. Gas and oil is actually there's quite a lot of it. Strategically, it's between China and India. It gives China warm water access to the Indian Ocean. There's loads of stuff going on, loads of stuff. And it will become of more interest to America when we all realise and wake up that that's actually what it's going to become. And there's also other involvement. There's North Korean involvement in Burma. There's Russian involvement in Burma. There's a lot of stuff going on that because of what they are, it's not really in our interests to allow this to continue. That's sort of the next project in a way, is to look at that. But you're right, it's yet to see how it'll unfold, but it's not yet certain that they will be completely within China's sphere of influence, but they will try and play everybody off against each other.
so it doesn't break what it did.
Yeah, they're quite clever. Been in power for 40 years as a bunch of army guys, it's not bad.